Hey, I hope you're good. So I've got a Studio Electronics MIDI Mini in the studio with me. And this inspired me to conduct an experiment I've been meaning to do, which is to record the MIDI Mini plus every single synth and drum machine I own at the same time, synchronized to my DAW, but also on their own discrete channels as a multi-track recording, because that was theoretically possible. I tried it and sure enough it works, so I thought it might be of interest or useful to you guys to show you how I did that, but also I'd love to hear your opinions on it and also your solutions to this kind of recording. So the first thing I needed to do was get MIDI to as many places as possible at the same time. So the way you do that is with a MIDI router, which is what this guy is here at the bottom. So I went on the forums and asked what people were using. There's lots of different routers you can get, of course, but a number of people were recommending the Motu MIDI Express 128, which is what I got. Plugged it in via USB into my computer, and sure enough, it comes up in Cubase. It wasn't any more complicated than that. And then you've got 8 MIDI ins and 8 MIDI outs, so the connections are on the back of this unit. There is a duplicate of channel 8 on the front in and out, which is pretty handy if you want to stick something in quickly without having to go around the back. And then, yeah, in your DAW, they will come up as 8 options of inputs and 8 options of outputs, and it just works, so it really isn't that complicated. So that was the first part of the puzzle. So the next part of the puzzle is the Arturia BeatStep Pro, which has appeared in loads of my videos, and I know a lot of you have got them, but just briefly, it's a controller that's got 2 onboard sequencers. They're CV and gate, and they can be volts per octave, hertz per volt, S-trig, V-trig, so they're very compatible and flexible. It's also got 8 drum gates, which I'm not actually using in this instance, and then it's got MIDI clock and DIN sync, which I am using, which I'll tell you more about in a second. You can send MIDI to it and then CV and gate out to 2 sources, so you can use it for MIDI to CV conversion basically. I'm actually using the onboard sequencers, and I'm sending one to an ARP Avatar here and the other to a Sequential Pro One, which is just off camera up there. And then I'm sending DIN sync to this Roland TR-606 over here, and that's running off its own onboard sequencer, but it's being clocked from the BeatStep Pro. So that's 2 analog synths and 1 analog drum machine from the BeatStep. So the BeatStep has got various synchronization modes, and one of them is USB, which means you can synchronize it to your DAW. So in Cubase, which is what I use, you can go to your project synchronization setup, and the BeatStep should appear if you've installed it. And then you can send it clock, and you can also send it start-stop commands. So when you hit record in your DAW, the BeatStep starts running in time with your DAW, which is fantastic. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is MIDI mods. So the first bit of my kit that I've had modded with MIDI is my TB-303 from 1981. So the original has DIN sync on the back, which of course was the precursor to MIDI. So you can utilize that import and install a Sequentix MIDI-based 303 kit, which is what is inside this unit. And it still works exactly the same as it always did. You can use the onboard sequencer, you can use the track mode, you can clock it using MIDI clock now instead of DIN sync, but you've now got this little cable that comes with it that connects in the back here, and you've got MIDI in. So you can send note on, note off. If you play over a higher velocity, you get accent, and if you play legato, you get slide, which is really cool. You've also got MIDI out. So you can write a pattern on the unit and then hit run and send it back to your DAW, tweak it in your DAW, send it back to the 303, or you can write several patterns on your DAW, then send them all to your computer, and then do the arrangement on your computer with cutting and pasting and chopping and changing, which is a heck of a lot easier to do than with the track mode on this. So it's a really cool upgrade. But then there's more to it, because the 303 has CV and gate out, so you can send MIDI in, and the 303 will simultaneously send on CV and gate out, so you can use it as MIDI to CV conversion, which is really handy. So I've tried this out. I've sent MIDI to the 303 and sent CV and gate to my Pro One, to my Avatar, to my SH-101, and it works. So that's really handy and worth thinking about if you're getting a MIDI mod, because you can think, could I actually do CV and gate conversion with it at the same time? And the last MIDI related thing I wanted to talk about is the Korg SQ-1. So this is a step sequencer, and via USB on the back here you can clock it and you can send it start-stop signals. But you can also use the USB to send MIDI through it, so MIDI to CV conversion. and it comes up as a MIDI out in Cubase. So that's really nifty, and that's what I'm going to be using to convert MIDI to CV at Hertz per volt for my Korg MS-20. So we've got MIDI that's being sent to 8 places at the same time from the Motu Express. We've got MIDI to CV conversion from the TB-303 MIDI-based mod, and also from the Korg SQ-1. We've got CV and gate sequencers that are being clocked and controlled from my DAW via the BeatStep Pro, and we've got DIN sync as well. So we've got everything hooked up and running, so how do we record it all at the same time? Well, I'm going to use a Soundcraft 22 MTK, which is something I've been experimenting with for about 4 or 5 months or so. So this is an analog mixing desk, a 22 channel mixing desk, but it has a trick up its sleeve, which it has a USB connection, and it'll send all 22 channels of audio discreetly from the mixing desk to your DAW. And they come in as 22 inputs in your DAW, basically. So just to be clear, it's not a mix coming off the desk into your DAW, it's every single channel in isolation. They come in post-gain and pre-fader, so you can use the desk and the EQ and the onboard effects to monitor the sound and make it sound nice, but you just get the raw, clean audio coming in from the mixer, which is actually great. You can then edit your audio and add plugins in your DAW and send it back via USB, and then it will join where it left, so then it will run down the rest of the channel and you can do an analog mix if you wish. That's not how I use it. I use it as an audio interface and a mixer at the same time, so it means I've got everything plugged in and I don't have to be pulling things in and out. I can just leave it set up and it just comes into my DAW simultaneously. Now, this is USB 2, and I was a bit skeptical that this would work. I thought surely there'll be some latency or dropouts or something, but I've tested it for months now and it does work. You occasionally get a little glitch or a dropout if you've got lots running on it at the same time, but not enough to cause any problems. And I know several people who use them, and aside from a couple having some problems with channels dropping, no one's had any major sync problems, which was what my major concern was. So I'm going to keep using this for the time being because it is working, and this is what I would recommend if you're on a budget, because they're not that expensive and you want to record lots of different things at the same time. So to summarize everything I've talked about, I've done this diagram, and as you can tell, my graphic design skills are pretty terrible. It looks like a toddler did it, but just go with it. So we've got a PC at the start, and via USB we're going to the Korg SQ-1, and that's doing a MIDI to CV conversion to the Korg MS-20, which is coming back to the Soundcraft 22 MTK. We're also going via USB to the BeatStep Pro, and that's on its USB sync mode, and that is sending out 2 sequences, one to the ARP Avatar and one to the Sequential Pro One. It's also sending out DIN sync to the Roland TR-606, which is running off its own internal sequencer, and the 3 of those are going back to the Soundcraft. Then we're going via USB as well to the Motu 128, and that's sending MIDI out to 8 synths or drum machines, as labelled here, and those are all going back to the Soundcraft. In addition to that, the TB-303, which has got the MIDI mod, is sending CV and gate out to the Roland SH-101, so it's duplicating the same part. They've got slightly different sounds, so I can pan one left and one right and make a stereo thing, and that's going back to the Soundcraft. And then with the Juno-6, it has no CV and gate and no MIDI, so the only thing you can do is send triggers to the arpeggiator, basically, and the Roland TR-707 has a dedicated trigger, which is rim trig out on the back. And so you'll see in the track, I walk over, switch the arpeggiator on the Juno-6, and then a few bars later, when the rim shots start coming off the 707 to the Juno via MIDI from here, as if by magic, the Juno-6 joins in the track as well, and of course that's running back here. So with all these inputs, some of them are stereo, so there's actually 17 channels of audio running and 3 methods of synchronization via USB, and the whole thing comes back via USB from the Soundcraft, which records into my DAW. So let's try it out and see if it works. And thus concludes my little experiment, and it does work, which I think is quite interesting. Hopefully it's interesting to you. I've put the audio from that little track in the description in a download. So there's the raw audio and also the mixed audio so you can compare. Let me know what you thought. Let me know how you synchronize stuff with MIDI and with MIDI routing and with USB recording. And I'll catch you on the next video. Thank you for watching.